Bill Rosenberg joins us from time to time to talk about political science, which is good because he's a professor of political science at Drexel University, teaching courses this time around, the fall term just starting, one of which is the course that he teaches is political science, an intro to political science, also running on empty. Actually, it's not running on empty. It's running for office. I thought I could give him a theme song. Anyway, Bill Rosenberg, tweeting at Dr. B. Rosenberg. Bill, welcome back. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. I hadn't thought of playing a theme song today. That's an interesting play.
By the way, I just wanted to mention that the word bombshell and stunning is all over the TV screens today, so I just want to make sure you can incorporate that into your classes somehow.
Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit. I'm sure that with political science, we're actually seeing one of those moments of history. I mean, it's not every year that we have a confirmation process for a Supreme Court justice. How does this play out when you're teaching this to young people who look to you for guidance as the wise man?
Well, my approach to political science is often to use real-world events to highlight sort of traditional political science type theories, things like the Watergate hearings or the O.J. Simpson trial are examples where by examining what's going on in the world around you, you start digging deeper into what is the politics of who gets what, where, when, and how, and provide a deeper understanding in which the students can really grasp what is the political realities of the time.
All right, so what do you tell them about this? Because this does not seem like a lot of historical moments when it comes to Supreme Court nomination and confirmation processes.
Well, when I first started approaching my academic year last year, the story that I try to provide with my students is that this is not normal times. A lot of the things that had already happened during the Donald Trump era, for people who were older, who had more experience in terms of the political world, recognized that the actions and the behaviors of the president were sort of outliers to what is the traditional role of the president and the traditional behavior of the president. As we start this academic year, we have this blockbuster situation on multiple fronts, one being the Kavanaugh hearings, and the second one being the continuation of the Mueller investigation into Russian collusion. It's hard to imagine a time when you had two such big blockbuster events, and in some ways, the common thread is Donald Trump. Donald Trump nominated Brett Kavanaugh. Donald Trump presided over his campaign, which has now surfaced with several people being convicted of various crimes associated with his campaign and also with the character of the people that have violated the law, including tax evasion and lying to the FBI. So these are things that students really need to understand. It's not really a partisan position. It's really an observation of the realities that we're being confronted with today.
Let's talk about the Supreme Court nomination of Judge Kavanaugh and the accusations. Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, one who's on the record, and then another one that just came out, a woman who doesn't really remember a lot of details, but she was at a party. It sounded like a kind of a drunken party at Yale University, and having something to do with Brett Kavanaugh exposing himself to her. She's a little hazy on details. To what level do we hold officials accountable, and whether it's a Supreme Court nomination, or maybe that is unique because it's a lifetime appointment, but to what level do we hold people responsible for something that happened years ago, and to what level do we actually presume that they are innocent or guilty? How does that play out in this discussion? Because there are some who say we should believe these individuals who are making the accusations. Others say that the presumption of innocence is on the part of the person who's being accused. How does this work from a political standpoint?
Well, I think the reality is that this is not a court of law. This is the court of public opinion. And essentially it provides for a situation where there's unfairness to both sides, both to Blasey Ford and also to Judge Kavanaugh. People are going to obviously question a situation where there's a lack of details, where there's a inability to sort of provide evidence. People feel comfortable with facts. But at the same time, you have to recognize that evidence and facts may not always be available. We're talking about, in the case of both Blasey Ford and Ramirez, that these are events that have happened 30 or 35 years ago. You're not going to have a video like we probably would have today with smartphones and cameras everywhere. So what happened then is going to be based upon recall and perhaps suppressed memory. On the other hand, we have the sense that we have someone who has defined these facts as being completely wrong, Judge Kavanaugh, and as a result, we have in effect seen this play out many times before, particularly in this Me Too movement environment where we had Harvey Weinstein, who had repeatedly made statements that he didn't do the things that he was being accused of. Ultimately, we have a small group of people in the Senate who are responsible for advice and consent to the president's nomination. But this is bringing up all the past with regard to Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas. This committee is really not in a position to do investigations. And at the same time, they're not really interested in reopening an FBI investigation. And part of that is political and part of it is structural, because the one who was supposed to open up the investigation with the FBI is supposed to be the chief executive, the president, and the president is certainly unwilling to do this.
And he's the only one who can.
Right, and what's really sort of remarkable, I think, when we take a look at this is that while Ford is asking for an investigation, Kavanaugh is not. And you would think that if Kavanaugh was innocent of the charges that are being leveled or the accusations that are being leveled, he'd want to do everything possible to have the FBI come in and disprove Ford's claims. He's not willing to. He's willing to testify, but he's not willing to have the FBI come in. He's not demanding this. And one would think that if you were truly innocent, you would have no fear of having the FBI come in.
Although, who knows when it's sort of like, why would you remain silent if you have nothing to fear? It's your right, and that's.
Although
that's a court of law, not politics.
Has made a clear statement about that, where he said, people that take the fifth are guilty, and now, he wants to have that be the new standard.
Speaking of which, is this going to be kind of what we can expect with Supreme Court nominations moving forward, that it's just going to be, I guess, as long as the Senate is so close, right now it's 51 Republicans, but down the road it could be 51 Democrats, it could be 50-50, it could be 52-48. I mean, is this what we can expect every time there's a Supreme Court nomination?
Well, as a political scientist, I would sort of step back and I would say that one of the issues is the partisanship of the day and the accusations and the Access Hollywoods and the step in front of the door and put your foot in to try and get a story out to the public. But I would step back a little bit and say I think a lot of this is due to the fact that the nuclear option was used by Senator Mitch McConnell, in which he changed the rule that the Senate operated on that said that no longer did you need to have 60 votes in order to do confirmation. And when we had Neil Gorsuch come up, he did not get 60 votes. I mean, he did not have the ability to get what had been the traditional line of votes to become a U.S. Supreme Court justice. If we had that 60-vote minimum, we would not even be talking about Judge Kavanaugh right now. He would not be under consideration because it would be clear that Mitch McConnell would not have enough votes to pass him on to the full for the full Senate to consider.
So again, do we have 8 Supreme? So in other words, will we go if this were to happen? Would we wind up having 8 Supreme Court justices until such time as there are enough senators to make it happen? I mean, Senator Harry Reid, when he was the majority leader, had actually pushed for the elimination of that nuclear option on other judicial nominations. But I wonder, so does this mean that, in other words, if the Supreme Court only has 8 justices, is that what we can expect moving forward?
Well, first of all, the Constitution does not require that there be 9. When the Constitution was first formed, there were only 6 Supreme Court justices.
Well, we're not going to have more than 8, I guess, for some time. It looks like if the way it rolls out.
That's possible. It's also possible that Donald Trump may come back and put in someone that's somewhat more moderate that the Democrats are willing to accept. But we are dealing with a ping pong match between the Democrats and Republicans about who gets onto the bench. But in the end, I think what we have to recognize that the Supreme Court is really ultimately going to be 9 men and women whose real power is not in sort of force, it's in integrity and it's in the ability to seem impartial. And for the justices that are currently there, this is kind of a nightmare because it's really unraveling what is being seen for a while as a problem with the court. I remember a couple of years ago I was in Chicago and Justice Breyer had just come out with a book, and he was making that point very clear that, the Supreme Court doesn't have an army, it doesn't have sheriffs, it doesn't have people that can go out and actually make the decisions work. It requires them to be viewed as above reproach, and then to have Congress or the president basically act. And I think that what we're looking for right now is sort of return to somewhat a point of normalcy. Whoever comes up next is also going to have to be fearing what's going to come out with them. And I think what we're really confronted with is that perhaps we have a standard that's going to be very, very difficult for anyone to reach. But in the end of the day, that standard has to be there. These are the people that are going to be making the decisions that really guide the direction of the United States.
Bill, as always, thank you so much.
Have a great day.
You too. Dr. Bill Rosenberg, professor of political science at Drexel University, joining us here to talk about the nominating process for the Supreme Court justice in this particular case of Brett Kavanaugh. He is tweeting at Dr. B. Rosenberg.